This is the way the spirit or the awareness of consciousness comes through. It's like you said, it's subtle. And you can have those catastrophic moments, but we're not having those. We're having subtle communications with other beings that we can't explain. And we don't always have enough data to explain, but it's subtle enough for us to pick up on.
Welcome back. I'm here again with Elsa Dillon. Elsa, welcome back.
Thanks, Sean. I'm excited to talk again. So
I think it is not quite the equinox for you, but it will be, you're on the verge of it, right? It's on the 21st for both of us.
Yeah, so we have it at 10:43 tonight. So again, so it'll be the same. We're on the same day, same page, but it'll just be in our night. It's before midnight.
And it'll be in my morning. Yeah, so it's the 22nd for you, right?
Yeah, it will still be the 22nd. Yeah, 2/2.
And it'll be tomorrow for me. But it will also be the 22nd. Just extremely early. But you were saying that there were a lot of odd behaviors by animals and things like that. A lot of it related to recent solar activity, right?
Yeah, well, I haven't woken to this like this before. So we woke up to our dogs. And then I started hearing like busyness. So I thought, I have to get up. I've got a meeting with Sean, because it sounded like dawn, that sound of dawn where everything wakes up. And it was 11 o'clock last night, and I went outside and it was alive. Everything was awake. Cows, black cockatoos, kookaburras, willy wagtails, dogs in distant hills, crows, all going off. They went off for, I think I timed it from when I got up, probably 5-10 minutes, but it could have gone for, because I was in sleep, could have gone for 15-20 minutes. A lot of domestic animals and wild. What was interesting, I couldn't hear any cars, no cars, which is weird because it's Saturday night here. So usually people are coming home from the city to their farmhouse. But not one car, like nothing. I was like, this is weird. It was weird. It was really eerie. What was interesting is the puppies were really stressed. They were crying. They weren't barking. They were stressed. And I guess because they could see the parent dogs barking at something. So if they're barking at a fox, it's different. But when you're barking because there's an earthquake coming or a rumbling in the ground, it's different because it's, when does it go away? It's under their feet or it's in the energy. And this is what I think the puppies are 3 months old. So in their lifetime, they haven't felt this before. So they were worried. I mean, the first time it rained, they were worried. The second time it rains, it's fine, right? So the older dogs knew, but the puppies were crying like they were being hurt. And this is a great example. Now, Sean and I just spoke, and he said that he had occurrences as well at the same time 5 hours ago.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
So now it's happening here.
I didn't read too much into it, but, when I looked out the window, there were two birds just kind of hopping around, that's pretty normal. But then a squirrel kind of rolled up and just sat there looking at me, and then moved a little bit further, sat there looking at me. And this was like a 10-minute interaction. This is not like here and there. And then it got up on its hind legs and just looked directly at me and was just kind of looking. Again, it wasn't there. I mean, squirrels are very skittish, but it didn't move. I kept looking to the sky because, it would have been easy pickings for a hawk. Right. But no hawks showed up. And then a hummingbird flew right up to the window. It was just kind of hovering and looking at me for a little bit and then flew back to a tree. But it was weird. I wouldn't classify it as well outside of the norm, but it was definitely different. I think there's also a lot of solar activity, and just for the audience, I'm not just saying this to say it. So when I asked ChatGPT about it, what came up was, it just says currently solar activity is relatively high with a significant number of solar flares observed over the past few days. On September 14th, 2024, an X4.5 solar flare was detected along with a coronal mass ejection, CME, that led to a G3 geomagnetic storm watch. The probability of further C-class flares is at 99%, M-class at 60%, and X-class at 15%, indicating a high likelihood of continued activity in the future. In addition, the last recorded geomagnetic storm was on September 13th, 2024, which reached a KP index of 6, that's G2 level, showing significant geomagnetic disturbances due to solar activity. So when I asked, for folks who are listening, they're probably like, that means nothing to me. That's just what, right? It doesn't. So what I did is how does this compare to average solar activity? So the answer I got is the current solar activity characterized by the recent X4.5 solar flare and a series of M-class flares is higher than average. Solar activity is measured by the number of and intensity of solar flares, sunspots, and coronal mass ejections, CMEs, and it varies throughout the 11-year solar cycle. So in terms of flare class, so C-class flares are relatively common and can occur multiple times per day during peak activity. M-class flares are less frequent but can occur several times a week during maximum. And then X-class flares, the most intense, are rare even during solar maxima, occurring a few times a year at most. So just remember that, X-class flares. But on September 14th, there was a 4.5 X-class solar flare. The other thing that is important to note, so I wanted to look at historical events to get a sense for how intense an X-class flare was. So I looked up the Carrington incident. So the Carrington incident, which occurred in 1859, is widely regarded as the most intense geomagnetic storm on record. It was caused by a coronal mass ejection that struck Earth's magnetosphere, leading to extreme space weather conditions. So in terms of where it rated, if they were classified today, the associated solar flare would likely be an X-class event, possibly exceeding X40 on the modern scale, which is the upper limit for measured solar flares. So this would make it significantly stronger than the recent X4.5 flare, right? So I think that X 4.5 flare is probably the most intense of this year. So the bottom line is there's a lot of intense solar activity right now. We're not making it up. We're not kind of commenting on the zeitgeist. Like the sun is likely near its solar maximum and it's very active right now. And given all the geomagnetic storms, it may explain some odd activity by animals. All right, they might be a little off right now. So, but not, intensely off. We're not seeing birds like fly into windows or anything like that. Right.
No, but this is the way the spirit or the awareness of consciousness comes through. It's like you said, it's subtle. And you can have those catastrophic moments, but we're not having those. We're having subtle communications with other beings that we can't explain. And we don't always have enough data to explain, but it's subtle enough for us to pick up on.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
And this is where we're at now. It's, do you want to pick up on it? Because they're feeling it, we're feeling it. We can all work together with this and assist each other. Or you can act like you're separate from the cosmos and the universe, which is crazy because this is where you come from. But you want to act separate and work the old way. Well, the old way is failing. So these solar flares seem to, we find, rattle anyone who's playing out the old programs. It seems to rattle them more. So this then becomes a healing practice. And this is what we've noticed since that interview we first did, is how now all these fields literally are crossing over. Animals speak, astrology, solar flares, meteors, ET activity, sea life activity. It's all interacting with crystals. It's all working. It's all connecting in, and we're realizing that we are part of that. Once we are conscious of this, which is literally an awakening, once you are conscious of this, then we start becoming powerful creators that we are. But if you give the power to somebody else all the time, then who's running you? Who's reigning you? This is why the new way of disclosure cannot come through who ruled us before.
Mm-hmm.
But that means we don't have a formula. And this can seem dark because you don't have a platform to work off. And what's interesting is this meeting that Sean and I are having is on the Equinox. The Equinox is a table. It's a level of understanding. It's the bile inside us. It's the spleen. It's the yin and the yang. It's having a balance. It's the pH of us. It's number 7, even, Eve, belly of Eve. It's our belief system. It's where we have the gut feeling come from. We have to get our spleens and our livers in balance to move in the new way. This is coming about with you on the Equinox.
Offline, you were talking about Comet C 2023A3, also known as the Tsuk-Chinshan Atlas. And say a little bit more than that, and I'll add to it because I have all the data.
Okay, so you have data, which is good because I don't. So I'm outside in the sun and I have this song come through at last. You know this song, like this great singer? She keeps, and I'm like, can you go? I'm like, when this song keeps playing over in my head, I know they want me to check the words. So I check the words. It's about this comet. And comet is A3. Last year we had A3, so we called it the bookend. and it affected a lot of our cars, washing machine. Our washing machine coded E3 as its malfunction. This sent a lot of people flipped out from this comet going past. This came through, I think, in around January, February. And from that point on, some people I would speak to who have been spiritual advisors for many, decades, said 2023 was their worst year. And it pretty much kick-started from this comet. It's because it's upgrading and they're having new feelings, foreign feelings come in. They might be returning and having past life experiences because the comet is dropping dust on them and it triggers senses in them. And some of them might remember that dust, like it might be dust from where they've got dust from before, or it might be dust where it's new dust. This is spoken about in films. Or we call it smear golden compass, Dune. I haven't seen the new Dune. I only know the old Dune film, the first one. Mm-hmm. But Dune, they speak of the spice. Spice is sense. Sense is essence. Essence is your senses. So we believe in the information and the happenings that our family have had. We are crustaceans and crustaceans and crustaceans of tar, which is from the meteors. And it rains down on us, and each year they come past, you upgrade and become a higher being. So you have to have constant change. The system doesn't really allow for constant change. It keeps you in this loop all the time. You have your birthday, you have Easter, you have Christmas, and they work it around all these festives to keep you busy. But each year you're upgrading and becoming a higher being. So we have A3 comet. We have E3, and they showed me yesterday. So I spoke with Sean yesterday, and then I had to go away in the sun and think about it. And they showed me this through ruins. So I was sitting with a herd of sheep, the neighbour's sheep next door. I was sitting near water tanks, water tanks hold great energy, by the way, because it's water, intelligence. We believe water holds the Akashic records. So when you're around masses of water, so a swimming pool, water tanks, ocean, creeks, dam, usually if you're tapping into information, it becomes greater, even having a bottle of water next to you. So I'm out there, outside, sitting in the sun, water tanks, and a herd of sheep, and they start showing me ruins. So I start drawing the ruins, and it's matter and water is the same word. It's just W and M upside down. And they said it's the two E's. Then you drop them down over each other and becomes a Freemason symbol, which doesn't have great energy if you anchor there. If you keep going, when you drop
Freemason symbol is the square and compass. Is that?
That's the best part of this. It's a compass. Mm-hmm. It's a tool. When you drop the M of matter down on the water, Akashic records, it becomes an A. It's A3. It's the comet coming past. This is what they call it, A3. The W represents two peaks or two marks, which is, again, the matrix or the one once, which is all of us. So you have you, the active you, and then you have the spirit or consciousness of you, the will, or the sense, or the essence. So you have the act of you and the sense. And what's happened over the last few decades is that we've only been in one version of us, which is act. And they've kept us in this and distracted us with so much to stop this. This over here was always cuckoo. hoo-ha, cuckoo, crazy, put them in asylums. It's astrology. It's crazy. But what's interesting is that my family, my husband and I, we're photographers, so we would work around astrology because we knew that the skies would be clearer on these days of astrology, because they would work around the lunar cycles and things like this, because they're using all the tools before them, but they're telling us not to. Why? To keep us weak. Comes back to the days of the week.
Mhm.
You know, we kind of have to just have this surrender and let go that we have been tricked. All of us have been tricked. We've all kind of been enslaved in some way or another. And not only do you have to let go of that feeling, then you have to let go of the anger of it, because you want to let someone have it because of the sorrows it's caused us throughout our lives. But then you have to then rise above that again. It's like you have to go through these stages of it. And this is what they call the dark night of the moon and the awakening process. So where does it get us to now? Well, through animals, through just you and I sharing information and solar flares and old ancient ways, I can see how this is about the comet that is coming past now. They call it the blue one. And it's supposed to be one of the closest comets in our lifetime coming past. Comets and meteorites are unpredictable. They can't predict them. Why can't they predict them? They can predict everything else. They can't predict them.
I can shed light on that.
They change orbits.
Yeah, so a little bit more about this particular comet. So it's currently making its way through the inner solar system, and it's expected to reach its closest approach to the sun, or the perihelion, on September 27th, 2024. And it's gaining attention because it could become one of the brightest comets of the year. And then estimates suggest that it might reach a brightness of around magnitude 2.5. I'm not sure what that means, but apparently pretty bright, during its closest approach to Earth on October 12th, 2024, which would make it visible to the naked eye under good conditions. Now, this is to your point, Elsa, about the unpredictability. So the comet's behavior has been unpredictable. There were indications earlier this year that its nucleus might be fragmenting, which could impact its brightness and visibility. If it survives its encounter with the sun, it could provide a spectacular display in mid-October, appearing in the western sky shortly after sunset. And then what it's also saying is the comet's trajectory is highly inclined, and it has a retrograde orbit, which means it will appear to move quickly across the sky. For those looking to observe it, the best visibility will be in the southern hemisphere, starting in September. So that's why you can see it, Elsa, but I can't, with a shift to more favorable viewing conditions for the northern hemisphere in mid-October. So that's when I should be able to see it. But I think the reason it's highly unpredictable is because the stuff that makes the comet is burning up. So depending on, where its angle is and all that good stuff, parts of it will burn up and evaporate. So that would change its trajectory, which makes it a little bit more unpredictable.
And this is because it is frozen tar. And frozen tar melts more with solar flares. And we believe the more people become conscious of their senses, this triggers the sun. This is why we're called soul. They're called soul R. The animals already do this, but for us to do it, to be conscious, we trigger the solar. So this mass awakening process is triggering the sun. People go, that's impossible. And I go, well, okay, maybe it is impossible, but you start looking at the solar flares. And we've been watching the solar flares with many around the world. And every time we do I do a mass meditation, not personally with me, but they go and do it, or we have intentions, we put out prayer, we go and do grounding work, we will see spikes in the solar flares. And it does. It sounds absolutely crazy, but it has happened so many times now, but we track it. What's interesting is just recently it's all been turned off. We can't access it at the moment. So obviously this to me then is a confirmation. And this is what's happening. We find with disclosure is the more we tap into something, they turn it off, or someone turns it off, or they make it harder, or they try and do a smear campaign on it, or they'll bring out a movie. They do that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But see, it's happened to us so many times over 30 years that to us, we just acknowledge it quickly and move on. We don't dwell on it. We just go, it is what it is, move on. And it's just a confirmation. It doesn't make us feel greater. It doesn't make us feel more powerful than anyone else. It just helps our family. And us sharing this with others around the world has helped their families. And this is disclosure. And they're teaching their children this. And they're teaching their friends this and their neighbours. They're helping their elderly in homes or hospitals. And they're starting to see this is crumbling, this is working. This is crumbling, this is working. Even though this is crazy, it's working. What's interesting with disclosure is how crazy the old world does look. And it gets crazier when they talk about what's in our food. Now, this is on, I think Richard brought up yesterday a few things that were on just normal news, and I was like, they're telling the public what's in their food is plastic and stuff.
Yeah, I think elites have reached a point where they think they have so much power and influence that they can tell us what they're doing to us, and it really doesn't matter. Right? It was like, I don't want to go too much into it, but it was like during the pandemic when you couldn't attend your grandmother's funeral, but social justice protests were totally fine. Totally safe.
Well, we had complete lockdown, but we had a huge influx of Hollywood movies being produced here. So we have full lockdown where we're not allowed to go and buy certain amounts of toilet paper, which let me tell you was a big issue in a family of 10. Anyway, we would be getting filmed when we would go out because there was too many of us in the bus. So they thought we were having a party. Yet our kids' bus stop, we were friends with the gentleman that owned his home. He had a Netflix film being filmed there. And they had actors from everywhere flown around the world. They came in that day. How is this possible? I'm talking big names too. Like you think of the biggest name in Hollywood, they were there at this house. I'm going.
Well, our governor here, Gavin Newsom, was having meals at a fancy restaurant called the French Laundry when, very close, no masking, nothing. So
they're amazing, right? How they can work out that they won't get it.
Well, they don't. Yeah, they don't follow their own rules. They don't follow their own rules. So I think people have seen through the mask, and that's why I think people who are running things, that's why they're doing things like censoring, literally almost everything because they're afraid. And it just makes them look even weaker every time they do it.
So if they're telling us don't use this, don't use astrology, don't use the solar flares, go back to work, go back to school, do this, do that, keep doing this the same, everything's the same, you're going to have Christmas next year, you're going to have Boxing Day next year, you're going to have Easter next year, it's all the same, just work through your life this way. Why are they so scared about all this information here? That's the interesting part.
Well, what they've trained me to do personally is if they say, this is Looney Tunes, I'm like, oh, maybe I should look into that. Right? Like it's trained me to do if they tell me that not that I shouldn't do something, because there's certain things that you shouldn't do, regardless of whether or not somebody's telling you not to do it. But if they're saying, don't say this, it's like, oh, I must be onto something. I must be right over target.
Yeah.
Right. So I will gravitate more toward that. And I think they don't understand that they're actually, I mean, it's very Pavlovian. It's what we used to call in the military a negative training effect. So for instance, the tanks that we used to prepare the U.S. Army to fight the quote unquote bad guys would not look like our tanks. They would look like Russian tanks, because we didn't want to train the U.S. military to grow accustomed to shooting its own tanks, right? We wouldn't use M1 tanks to fight other M1 tanks because they would have a negative training effect. But what the elites of this country and just the global elites are doing they are effectively, but unwittingly, training their populations to take anything that they tell us not to do or not to look at as a data point to suggest that's exactly what I should be looking at. So there are some things that you probably shouldn't look at, and they're right. But a lot of these things, if they're telling you not to look into it or not to do any more work on it, it probably means that you're right over target. So you still have to use some discernment. But I think, again, they're unwittingly training people to do the opposite of what they want.
So the world's spinning this way, right? And we're all complying with it. And then it starts having to go the other way and respin. And this is what we find. And this is the terminology we use. This is why we have our website the way we do. We call it Spin Beings, because we're respinning now back on the matrix. So everything the matrix program has put out now becomes a confirmation. It's like it's going back over timelines of it. And it's been amazing, because the more they play out this stuff, the more it confirms things for our family. Mm-hmm. And this is, I know what's happening to many around the world, but you were saying a lot of things too. And so what's interesting is yesterday I came into the meeting with Sean. So I'm sharing an experience now. I come into the meeting with Sean and I'm quite rattled, as in I felt like my feet were floating off the floor. I even said to Sean I was quite nervous. And it wasn't that I was nervous of Sean, it was that I could feel the energy was getting stronger. And then we spoke for a long time, and then I couldn't go any further. I said I had to go out and collect more information, which I did. I come back now today with Sean, and it's like the information settles in you. And you go, oh, it is about this. It's kind of like you have the information come through, like you'll have the animals come through and you feel these feelings or you get these messages from them, and then you let it settle in you, in your cells, and then you see if it comes up again the next day or the next hour, and then you go, oh, this is the way for me to move. So you use it as a tool, and this is what they've been using, the ruling ones. They've been using all the tools, which we have been told are silly. Mm-hmm. But now we're tapping into the silly And these tools are coming before us. And, I've got people all around the world. I don't even have to tell them what's going on. They know. They know on some of the family members. They know what's happening with animals because they're telepathic. They're tapping into the cosmos. No one trained them to do this. They're just becoming more and more and more of the acting one and the witness of themselves, the consciousness. It's the consciousness here that we have had turned off as humans now is awakening in us, and now we'll be able to be the full version of ourselves. But who am I is here. You just have to will it in. If you don't want to have consciousness, you'll just play out the act and you'll just go through life like this. And sometimes the universe will step in and say, well, look, you need to wake up. So they'll give you a crisis moment. And then usually on crisis moments, spirit comes in. Spirit is jinn. Spirit is noble gas. Spirit is understanding. Spirit is empathy. Spirit is compassion. Spirit is surrendering. Spirit is openness to not knowing what is. It just is. It is. It's the ones of the matrix. It's the true matrix. And this matter and water, the M's and the W's dropping down make A3. Matter and water is altar or atar or one tar, which again comes back to the one tar. If we do palindrome on this word, it becomes Rita. Rita is saltar. It's the same both ways. When I say there's no randoms in life, the fact that I met Sean on a palindrome back in 2023, yeah, it was like the message has been held then, the palindrome, for me to understand it now. But back then I didn't understand it, but now I understand us meeting. And I said to Sean, why did you want to see me today? Why didn't you want to see me 6 months ago or 6 months ahead? Like, why today? And he followed his will, his consciousness. Where does this come from? It comes from you being open and tapping in. And this is what we keep saying to people. Keep tapping into you, not the information. Tap into you. The information's there as a tool, but you have to tap into the information in you. You have to let that information settle in you. Does it feel right for you? My information that I'm sharing now might not feel right for you because of where you're at. Not you, Sean, but I mean, whoever's listening. My information might be just a smidgen, and then they take it way further, which is great. My information might rattle them and make them have anger, and it might make them see other things that they have to address in their life. And this is what we do for each other. I woke up last night because I could feel all the animals rattled, so that I could come in today and share with Sean that he's having animals and I'm having animals rattled by this solar flare. It affects everything. Water, sun, everything affects us. Tap into it, literally, tap into it and use it as a tool, as they have been using. Then you will rule yourself. You will serve yourself. Who's serving us now? They would like to keep serving us now.
Oh, I don't think they're serving us at all. I think they're serving themselves. They would like us to keep serving them. Right.
Yeah. Well, the word serve is, one of my biggest encounters, I went into a deep coma sleep. I listened to some great speakers on a live, and I was in the chat live. And then as soon as the live finished, as I collapsed on the couch, I never sleep through the day. I'm not really good at meditating. I'm not a meditating type person. Anyway, I fell into a 5-hour coma sleep. The kids had to keep checking if I was breathing. I woke up and I had a complete incision in my neck here. Like a laser mark, straight, so straight. There was no bleeding, there was no raised skin, and there was no pain. And I didn't know it was there. The kids saw it, and Richard, and I was like, what is that? And it was this straight line. It was like the precision you see on the pyramids. Anyway, I tried not to freak out because cutthroat has quite a lot of dark anchors to it. Anyway, I ended up working it out through spirit, is that they said you have to cut the food. And I was like, cut what food? And they said, it's not food of the gods, it's food for the gods. And I realized that they were talking about the ancient alien DNA within. And they were asking us to reduce how we're feeding them. And it's to do with peas, peasants, starches, and sugars. The pleasing ants. It's stop serving them. Stop feeding them. This is what they feed off. Change your diet. Diet is the two of you. Change the diet in there and you'll have greater intel. And I was like, okay. And so again, I thought we were already eating healthy, but we changed a few more things in our diet, and then greater intel did happen, or greater activity or ghosts or something happened. It just becomes easier to understand the subtle.
The same thing goes with fasting, I think.
Fasting's huge, yeah.
Yeah, because I could speculate, but I'm not sure why it would work, but that's why kind of in early Christian history, mystics would go out into the desert and fast. It helps induce alternative states of consciousness. Actually, so does sleep deprivation for that matter, but that's also most likely a hallucination, because you will hallucinate if you don't get sleep. But anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Well, it's a true. So they would fast because of the May. May was the great or the grand, and it was where our planet shifts, the comets and things come past. So they knew that, this is before schooling, by the way, they knew that they would fast so that they would be even in their gut to receive the great intel coming through from the new tar and plasma. But if you've got too many of these in you, so you're out of whack, imbalance, or they're running your senses, which if you have too many of them, they affect your moods. You can't receive this information clearly. It becomes distorted.
Mm-hmm.
And they call it purging. They call the toilet a throne. These aren't coincidences. Well, they're not. They're not coincidences. They call it the royal flush.
Mm-hmm.
These words, these games are there before us. Look, it's so layered. The whole thing is so layered. There's so many versions and layers on it. That's why they say use discernment in yourself and go within and find it for you. Disclosure, though. I feel us meeting today, that and how I felt yesterday and the animals, I feel like I felt a shudder and I went, oh, is this it? Is this the next 6 months? Is this from the eclipse? Is this going to be a real big shudder, a real shake-up? Is this part of the disclosure, the equaling of us inside? It's exciting, but it also comes with great responsibility of ourselves. We have to be responsible in ourselves. You can't blame your mother. You can't blame your father. You can't blame your husband. You have to take responsibility for yourself. Can't blame your children. And you have to get over it. Get over the blame. Get over who owes who this, who owes that. Just work in yourself each day.
When you say disclosure, and we're talking about kind of the meaning of words and things like that, you raise an interesting point, albeit not intentionally, I don't think. So the word disclosure, right? It's dis and then closure. Closure just meaning to end something, to come to close. The funny thing is, the prefix dis generally means apart, away, or having a negative or reversing force. So it often implies a separation, negation, or opposition to the root word it modifies. So, for example, disconnect, to sever a connection, disagree, to have a different opinion, disapprove, to express a negative judgment. So it's commonly used to indicate the opposite or absence of something. So disclosure, the opposite of coming to a close. So it's almost like it's the unraveling, the opening, the opposite of closure. Like, we're not going to get to the end of anything, right? We might be at the beginning of something. And for many people, it's going to be profoundly unnerving.
Disclosure is too close It's not disclosure. It's too close. They're too close. Is God. It's disclosure is us seeing the gods within. This is in the Ten Commandments. There is no God above the other. The reason there is no God above the other is because we're all in there. We're in our senses. We're in the place of entry, where it's the placebo effect. It's our belly of Eve. It's the place of entry. It's where it starts from. It's where the first spark of us begins. It's where our starseed is, and we crustacean from here. And so once you realize, get this in balance, go from there. This is the equinox in us. This is the horizon in us. This is the Horus in us, Taurus, the rise and the set of the suns in us. And it is the belly of Eve. It's nothing to do with female. It's just the belly is in Eve. That's us. Him and her is the same word. They've just told us it's different. Yes, we're different because we're physically different, but the him and the her is us. There's many different things in mythology and astrology that I can go into. It gets really deep. Again, it's the layers of us. So by knowing this comet is coming and it's upgrading, and you go, and these solar flares are happening, you can go, okay, I'm feeling a little tired. I'm feeling out of whack because of what's going on. Because I'm like the animals, I carry water in me and I'm getting affected by these things. So you take the heat off you being human. You understand that you're a body, the one acting, and you also understand you have a conscious in that. And it feels weird. It feels unfamiliar. It feels alien because it is. So then you just let it sit with you and you rest. And you let the God rest is God stand still in you. That's what rest is. So you allow the new information or intelligence or sense or essence or spice or dust or whatever you want to call it, rest in you, in your cells, so your cells can adjust, and then you go from there. If you're in the program and you're working 9 to 5 and you have this schedule and you don't allow for time for this, it will affect you. You're not meant to run like that. You're meant to have ebbs and flows. And we are not trained to do this. So we have to find a new way now to do it this way. And there are no rules. You've just got to go in and find and be creative in you. And this is the new way. This old way that was run through money and bloodlines is failing now. And it is literally in the hands of imagination and creativity. And if you're in a space program trying to remote view this, they can't see past this because it's impossible to see past it. Because how can you remote view every creator? So it would look like the apocalypse. It's not the apocalypse for us. It's the apocalypse for the ones that we have been their host.
It's the apocalypse for them.
Yes.
The people who are trying to control.
They said a lot of famous people, some that are not here now, but David Icke and Jordan Maxwell, they've all said the undoing of them will be the symbolism. And this is what I feel that is very clear for me with these words, palindromes, dates, numbers. I think you just said this, one of the solar flares was 2.5. 2.5 is 2.5, which is S, and then an S spinning back on itself.
Oh, that's the brightness of the comet was 2.5 brightness.
Yeah, so even the brightness of comets and things, there's code in everything. So I see all the tools before me and I grab them and I see which ones resonate for me and I use them. And I go, oh, so they're spinning the S's around the parasites within, little snakes. Yeah, but they've gotten us to here. They've served us to this point. We needed to have this intelligence of language and understanding to this point. Do I like everything I've heard and seen? No, it's quite horrible, a lot of it. But I also, there's a lot of great. We just have to go this way now. But we've been stuck in all these square boxes now, and now all the walls have fallen off. So it can feel disorientating, like being in a aircraft floating down. You have to find you have to find it, yeah.
I mean, again, the equinox, equilibrium, balance, harmony. The other thing that people have to realize is it's going to be, if you're putting your livelihood and your destiny into the hands of another person, you're going to be profoundly unsettled for the rest of your life. This is a time in history where I think the unraveling that we're witnessing with the imperfection of our leaders, the incompetence of institutions, it all boils down to no one is coming to save you. Only you can save yourself. And I think the mass of humanity has to begin to realize that. I mean, you should help others, but you shouldn't expect others to help you. It will naturally come as a consequence of your own action, right? And I think you've talked about numerous times, Elsa, of looking within first. All the answers are within, right? It's like we're the seeds, right? We're the seeds of like an oak tree, right? Within that seed is the blueprint of a great oak, right? It just has to grow and be projected to that, to become that. And I think that's what we all are. And I think for people who are deeply uncomfortable with what's going on around us, you need to learn how to trust in yourself and learn to provide for yourself. Learn to be the master of your own solutions. Don't expect big institutions or the government to come and save you, because you will be disappointed. That's a certainty. It's not, there's not like, oh, maybe they could help. Maybe if in this election, this one person wins, everything will be better. I can tell you right now, it's not going to be better, right? The people you elect are always going to be incompetent, because the type of people who seek power are imperfect people. They're the worst of us. So this is a time in history, much like the Protestant Reformation was a time when there was a disintermediation between God and man. You no longer needed the priesthood, at least that's what Protestants believed, in order to get close to the divine. The same is true of government. You don't need the intercession of a government to do what is right. In fact, we probably don't need governments at all. And right now, what we're seeing is the government is effectively a parasite on all of us. They don't provide any services of any use. They just extract our life energy via time converted into dollars, right? And, where I live in California, if you make a certain income, you work for the government. They take 55% of every dollar you make, both federal and state. And that's inhumane. Like, it's evil. Like, there's no other. So we're just in the time where, I'm not saying that we should provoke the government, right? I'm not saying, again, and I don't want to be too religious, but, as Christ would have said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar, render unto God what is God's, right? So the government is just a negative force that's in our lives. Don't provoke it. Just ignore it, right? Follow the laws and be, but what they do at their level, it's always going to be extractive, right? It's always going to be harmful. And if when it does something immoral, speak out, but always try to be peaceful. But you are in control of what you do, and you are in control of whether or not you're saved, right? Saved by, in a particular situation. If a robber's in your house, right? Police aren't going to save you. They're going to get there. It's going to be too late. So, and there are many examples of this, but I don't know where I'm trying to go with this, but I think we're in a time where we've reached the balance, right? We're teetering over the edge, and we can either get more totalitarianism, we can either tip into totalitarianism, or shift into a more decentralized world where each and every one of us is the master of his or her own destiny. And I resonate more toward that, where you have freedom, where there are no secrets, where what you see is what you get. There's no guile. And the people at the top, that makes them profoundly uncomfortable. And I say, good. So anyway, I didn't mean to go on. That wasn't a rant, but it was.
I liked it.
Well, my rants are much more energetic, and I think that was just more of a.
But it comes
from. That was.
Well, it comes from a place of truth and humility and empathy and compassion, and knowing your background and where you've been through your career and your life. You've seen some stuff, and you're saying the same thing that I'm saying, that we see other people say, this is the easier way to be. This is the new way to be. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
but don't get hooked up in the anchors. Don't get hooked up in the timelines. Be discernment. I have the equator, equator is Ekita. Ekita comes back to the two peaks. The two peaks are the two high points, which is they call it the marks. And a lot of times through history, you'll see where they say sever or cut, but it's not. It's the father cuts himself, meaning he separates a seed from himself to make a son. So it's the ones. So equator is the ones, kita. So by finding the equal in you, you find the key essence of you. And this is what you were speaking of. If it doesn't feel right, don't do that anymore. This is your compass. This is your key. This is your compass now. And
we're not saying, you're not saying if it feels good, do it, right?
No,
but we're saying
use discernment. Use
if it doesn't feel right. If it doesn't feel like you're on the right path, get off the path.
And sometimes you're not meant to know all the answers all at once. If you did, there would be no point that you exist. Sometimes the answers, like yesterday for me, weren't all there. I had to go and sit and let it sit with me, the energy that was coming through when we first spoke. Sit with it, let it come through, and be humble about it. And then it came through, and I feel that what matter and water explains so much to me. So I'm so grateful that you sent me a message, because not have I just enjoyed my space speaking with you, but I feel like I've had a huge shift in my life from understanding it from this level. And it wasn't until I spoke and heard your voice and the frequency, you being a key player for me, now I get the keys of the leveling out of me.
I'm not sure how I did that, Elsa, but thank you for saying, because there was no intent. There was just.
But this is a good way to work it out. Is it conditional or is it unconditional? If it's conditional, it's for someone else's agenda. This is how we say to the kids, does it feel conditional? Did they offer the information without caring of the response? Or is it conditional of your response? If it's conditional for your response, give it space and time to settle and see if it still feels like that. If it still feels like that, generally most people cut it off. They go, we're not going to do that. And this is how we use it as a tool. So it can be simple as someone sends you an email. Why aren't you responding? You were supposed to respond. Da, 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 da. Well, when we send an email, it's unconditional, and it's up to them whether they want to respond back. We don't get on the phone and go, why aren't you here? Because it becomes an agenda. So
any final words for the audience, Elsa?
No, I feel that would be a good tool for them to work out discernment in themselves of others, so that you know where to place yourself for ease and grace. So if it's conditional, give it time. See if it's still conditional in an hour or so, or a couple of days. And then if it's unconditional, it's free, it's cosmos, it's allowing creativity, it's allowing imagination. It's not control. And this is the new way.
Well, thank you very much, Elsa. I appreciate you, and hopefully we'll chat more soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's two options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.